The Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room fell completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Senator Richard Blumenthal held up a single sheet of paper, his hand trembling slightly as the cameras zoomed in. Kash Patel sat frozen in his chair, his confident expression suddenly cracking like glass under pressure. What happened in the next 71 seconds would destroy Patel's carefully constructed defense about Jeffrey Epstein. The email Blumenthal was holding contained just 7 words, but those 7 words would expose everything Patel had been hiding for months. The packed hearing room, filled with journalists and politicians, watched as one of Trump's most loyal allies faced the moment he'd been dreading. This wasn't supposed to happen. Patel had prepared for weeks, rehearsing his answers, coordinating with Republican senators, building what he thought was an ironclad defense. But nobody had seen this email coming. Nobody knew it even existed until Blumenthal pulled it out like a prosecutor, revealing the murder weapon. Before we dive into how this single email demolished Patel's entire confirmation, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens when political careers collapse in real time. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and let's get into this explosive story. Kash Patel sat in the witness chair wearing a navy blue suit, his jaw set firm, eyes scanning the room with the confidence of someone who'd survived countless political battles. At 44 years old, this former federal prosecutor turned Trump loyalist had built a reputation as a fighter who never backed down. He'd been Trump's chief of staff at the Defense Department, led investigations as a House Intelligence Committee staffer, and written books attacking what he called the deep state. Now Trump wanted him as FBI director, and this confirmation hearing was supposed to be his coronation. Republicans had the votes. Conservative media was praising him as the perfect choice to clean up the bureau. Patel had even brought his elderly parents to sit behind him, an image meant to soften his aggressive persona. But across the room sat Senator Richard Blumenthal, the 77-year-old Democrat from Connecticut who'd been a federal prosecutor for decades before entering politics. Blumenthal had a reputation for being thorough, relentless, and patient. While other senators had grilled Patel about his loyalty to Trump and his plans to weaponize the FBI against political enemies, Blumenthal had sat quietly taking notes, waiting for his moment. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Patel became FBI director, he'd control the nation's premier law enforcement agency. He'd have access to investigations into Trump's enemies, the power to launch new probes, and the authority to reshape how the Bureau operated. Democrats feared he'd turn the FBI into Trump's personal enforcement arm. Republicans celebrated him as someone who'd finally hold corrupt officials accountable. But there was one issue that kept coming up, one question that Patel couldn't seem to answer cleanly: his connections to Jeffrey Epstein's network. Not direct connections to the deceased sex trafficker himself, but rather suspicious meetings with people in Epstein's orbit. Meetings that happened after Epstein's arrest, during investigations at times that raised serious questions about what Patel knew and when he knew it. For 3 hours, Patel had danced around these questions. He claimed coincidence, denied knowledge, insisted his meetings were routine government business. His answers were carefully rehearsed, technically accurate but somehow incomplete. Republican senators helped him by interrupting Democrats, by changing subjects, by giving him friendly questions that let him pivot away from uncomfortable topics. Blumenthal had watched all of this unfold. And then, during a brief recess, a congressional staffer handed him a folder. Inside that folder was an email chain obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request that had just been processed that morning. The timing was perfect. The content was devastating. When the hearing resumed, Blumenthal raised his hand to be recognized. The committee chairman, clearly frustrated but bound by procedure, acknowledged him. Blumenthal stood slowly, picked up the single sheet of paper, and approached the witness table. The room sensed something was about to happen. Cameras shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Patel's confident expression flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of concern crossing his face before he reset his features. "Mr. Patel," Blumenthal began, his voice calm but carrying an edge that silenced the room. "You've spent the last 3 hours telling this committee that you had no meaningful contact with anyone connected to Jeffrey Epstein's network. Is that still your testimony?" Patel leaned into his microphone. "Senator, as I've explained multiple times, I had routine meetings as part of my official duties. There was nothing inappropriate about any interaction I had during my time in government service." Blumenthal nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "Routine meetings, official duties, nothing inappropriate." He repeated Patel's words like he was tasting them, testing their weight. "Let me ask you specifically, did you ever meet with Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, Lee Safian?" The name hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Patel's eyes narrowed slightly. In the gallery, reporters immediately started typing on their phones. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's alleged accomplice, was serving 20 years in prison for sex trafficking. Any connection to her legal team would be explosive. I may have had passing interactions with many attorneys in my capacity as a government official, Patel said carefully. I don't recall every single meeting or conversation from years ago. This wasn't years ago, Mr. Patel, Blumenthal's voice sharpened. This was 14 months ago, September 15, 2023. Does that refresh your recollection? Patel shifted in his chair. His attorney, sitting behind him, leaned forward to whisper something. Patel waved him off. Senator, I attended hundreds of meetings during my time at the Defense Department, unless you have specific details. Oh, I have specific details. Blumenthal held up the sheet of paper, turning it so the cameras could see there was text on it, though not close enough to read. I have an email, Mr. Patel, an email from Lee Safian's office to your official government email address requesting a meeting to discuss what she called mutual interests regarding ongoing federal investigations. The room erupted. Republicans immediately objected. Senator Josh Hawley jumped to his feet. Mr. Chairman, this is ambush tactics. Minority cannot simply spring documents without proper notice. The chairman banged his gavel. Senator Blumenthal, this is highly irregular. Was this document provided to the committee in advance? It was provided to the majority within the last hour, Mr. Chairman, as soon as it was obtained through FOIA. Given the urgency of this confirmation and Mr. Patel's repeated denials under oath, I felt it necessary to address this immediately. The chairman frowned but couldn't dispute the procedure. Continue, but I'm noting this irregularity for the record. Blumenthal turned back to Patel. Would you like me to read the email aloud, Mr. Patel, or would you prefer to revise your previous testimony? Patel's face had gone slightly red. He took a sip of water, clearly buying time to think. Behind him, his parents looked confused and worried. Republican senators huddled, whispering urgently to their staffers. Senator, Patel said slowly, if you have an email requesting a meeting, that doesn't prove the meeting occurred. People request meetings all the time that never happen. Excellent point, Blumenthal said, and his tone made it clear this was not going to end well for Patel. Which is why I'm particularly interested in your reply. The room went absolutely silent. Your reply, Mr. Patel, which I also have here. Blumenthal held up a second sheet of paper. Would you like to tell this committee what you wrote back, or should I read it? Patel's knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the witness table. His carefully constructed confidence had evaporated. Every camera in the room was fixed on his face, capturing the moment of realization that he'd been caught. Republican senators looked at each other desperately. They had no idea what was in those emails. They couldn't object without knowing if Patel was about to perjure himself or if Blumenthal was bluffing. The tension stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I'd like to see those documents before answering, Patel said finally, his voice tight. Of course. Blumenthal walked over and handed copies to Patel and his attorney. He placed additional copies in front of the committee chairman and ranking member. These will be entered into the record. As Patel read the emails, his face went from red to pale. His attorney read over his shoulder, then immediately pulled out his phone, presumably to text someone. The room watched this unfold in real time, the silence so complete that the hum of the C-SPAN cameras was audible. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Patel looked up. Senator, I'd like to request a brief recess to consult with counsel. I'm sure you would, Blumenthal said, but you've been under oath for 3 hours, Mr. Patel. You've repeatedly denied having inappropriate contacts with Epstein's network. Now I'm asking you directly under oath in front of the American people. Did you or did you not meet with Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney to discuss federal investigations? The countdown had begun. Patel had to answer. Lying would be perjury. Telling the truth would destroy his nomination. Refusing to answer would be political suicide. Kash Patel's mouth opened, then closed. The confident fighter who'd bulldozed through 3 hours of democratic questioning now looked like a cornered animal. Every person in that hearing room knew they were witnessing something historic, the moment when a political career either survived or died. Mr. Patel, Blumenthal pressed, his voice carrying the weight of a prosecutor who already knew the answer. Your silence is noted for the record. Let me help you. I'm going to read your response to Ms. Safian's meeting request. You wrote, and I quote, "Happy to meet. Thursday works. I share your concerns about certain investigations proceeding without proper oversight. We should discuss parameters." The words detonated like a bomb. Journalists in the gallery erupted, dozens of reporters simultaneously typing, texting, and whispering. Democratic senators leaned back with expressions of vindication. Republican senators slumped forward, realizing the magnitude of what had just been revealed. C-SPAN's camera operators zoomed in tight on Patel's face, capturing every flicker of emotion. Senator Lindsey Graham, usually one of Trump's most reliable defenders, closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Senator Ted Cruz started reading the email copy in front of him, his face darkening. Even Josh Hawley, who'd objected so vehemently minutes earlier, sat frozen with his mouth slightly open. "Mr. Patel," Blumenthal continued, his voice rising with controlled fury, "you wrote that you shared concerns about investigations proceeding without proper oversight. This email was dated September 15, 2023. On that exact date, the FBI was actively investigating several individuals connected to Epstein's network who had not been charged. Are you telling this committee that you, as a senior Defense Department official, were coordinating with the attorney for a convicted sex trafficker to interfere with federal law enforcement investigations?" "That's not what," Patel started, but Blumenthal cut him off. That's not what you meant. Then what exactly did you mean by certain investigations proceeding without proper oversight? And what parameters were you discussing with Maxwell's attorney?" Patel's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. Patel waved him away again, a gesture that would later be analyzed as either arrogance or panic. He leaned into the microphone, his voice strained. "Senator, that email is being taken completely out of context. I was engaged in legitimate oversight of federal law enforcement as part of my duties." "Your duties," Blumenthal interrupted, "as Chief of Staff at the Defense Department, not as an FBI overseer, not as a Justice Department official. As a Defense Department staffer, what possible oversight role did you have over FBI criminal investigations into Epstein's network?" The question hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Patel had walked directly into the trap. If he claimed he had legitimate oversight authority, he'd be admitting to overstepping his role. If he admitted he had no authority, he'd be confessing to inappropriate interference. "I was acting on behalf of," Patel started, then stopped abruptly, realizing where that sentence was going to take him. "On behalf of whom, Mr. Patel? On behalf of President Trump? Were you coordinating with Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney on behalf of the President of the United States?" The room exploded again. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly, shouting for order. Republican senators were on their feet, some objecting, others frantically consulting with staffers. Democratic senators looked like Christmas had come early. In the gallery, network producers were making frantic hand signals to their camera operators, knowing they were capturing footage that would dominate the news cycle for days. Blumenthal raised his voice over the chaos. "Mr. Chairman, I move that these emails be forwarded immediately to the Justice Department for investigation of potential obstruction of justice, conspiracy to interfere with federal investigations, and violations of the Hatch Act." "Second," shouted 3 Democratic senators simultaneously. The chairman, overwhelmed and clearly blindsided by his own party's nominee, weakly banged the gavel. "The committee will take your motion under advisement." "Under advisement." Blumenthal's voice dripped with scorn. "Mr. Chairman, we have before us a nominee for FBI director who has potentially committed federal crimes. This cannot wait for advisement. I demand an immediate vote to suspend this confirmation until a criminal investigation is complete." Senator Chuck Grassley, the ranking Republican, stood slowly. At 91 years old, Grassley was the most senior senator and carried immense weight. When he spoke, everyone listened. "Mr. Chairman, I hate to say it, but Senator Blumenthal has a point. These allegations are too serious to ignore. I'm not saying Mr. Patel is guilty of anything, but we cannot proceed with this confirmation until we have answers." It was over. When Grassley, a Republican, sided with Blumenthal against a Republican nominee, the confirmation was dead. Every person in that room knew it. The only question was whether Patel would have the dignity to withdraw or force a humiliating vote. Patel sat motionless, staring at the emails in front of him. His parents behind him looked devastated. His attorney was furiously writing notes. And in that moment, 71 seconds after Blumenthal read the first email aloud, Kash Patel's dream of becoming FBI director shattered into a million pieces. But Blumenthal wasn't finished. He held up a third sheet of paper. "There's more, Mr. Patel. Because after you met with Ms. Safian, yes, we have proof the meeting occurred, I'll get to that, you sent an email to someone else. An email that's going to interest this committee very much." Patel's head snapped up, his eyes wide. The color drained from his face completely. "You sent an email to Roger Stone. You remember Roger Stone? Convicted felon pardoned by President Trump, longtime Trump advisor. You sent him an email saying, and I quote, 'Meeting went as discussed. They're willing to cooperate if we can provide assurances. Ball is in our court.'" The hearing room went from chaotic to absolutely nuclear. Republicans were shouting. Democrats were demanding immediate referral to law enforcement. The chairman had given up trying to control the proceedings. Reporters were literally running from the room to file breaking news alerts. And Kash Patel sat in his chair, silent, defeated, watching his career implode in real time on national television. Senator Amy Klobuchar, a former prosecutor herself, seized the moment. "Mr. Patel, who is they? Who was willing to cooperate? And what assurances were you offering on behalf of the government? Were you brokering deals for people connected to Epstein's network?" Patel's attorney finally stepped in, leaning into the microphone. "My client will not be answering any further questions until we've had a chance to review." "Your client," Blumenthal thundered, "has been answering questions under oath for 3 hours. He's repeatedly denied having inappropriate contacts. Now we have documentary evidence that he met with the attorney for a convicted sex trafficker, discussed federal investigations, and coordinated with a convicted felon to provide assurances to unknown parties. The American people deserve answers, counselor." The attorney whispered urgently to Patel. Patel shook his head. They argued back and forth in whispers that the microphones barely caught. Finally, Patel leaned back into his microphone. "I'd like to withdraw my name from consideration," he said quietly. The hearing room exploded one final time. It was over. In 71 seconds from the moment Blumenthal read the first email until Patel's world collapsed, one of Trump's most loyal soldiers had been completely destroyed. The immediate aftermath of Patel's withdrawal was absolute chaos. As he stood to leave the hearing room, escorted by Senate security and his devastated parents, reporters swarmed the hallways. Network anchors broke into regular programming with breaking news graphics. Twitter, or X as it was now called, absolutely exploded. Within minutes, Patel email was trending #1 nationwide. The 7 words from that first email, "I share your concerns about certain investigations," became instantly infamous. Memes flooded social media showing Patel's face superimposed on images of criminals caught red-handed. One viral post showed the moment his face went pale, captioned, "When you realize FOIA requests are forever." The political implications ricocheted through Washington like a pinball. Trump, who'd been in Florida preparing for a rally, immediately went into damage control mode. His Truth Social account erupted with posts. Kash Patel was ambushed by crooked Democrats. They leaked emails out of context to destroy a great patriot. This is exactly why we need to clean up the FBI. But notably, Trump didn't defend the content of the emails, only the timing of their release. Conservative media split into camps. Fox News hosts like Sean Hannity defended Patel, claiming the emails were routine government communication blown out of proportion by Trump haters. But other conservative commentators, including some at the Wall Street Journal and National Review, admitted the optics were devastating. "Even if technically legal," wrote one prominent conservative columnist, "coordinating with Maxwell's attorney while investigations were ongoing shows catastrophically poor judgment." Liberal media had a field day. MSNBC ran wall-to-wall coverage with the Chiron, Trump nominee linked to Epstein network. CNN brought on former federal prosecutors who explained in detail why Patel's emails could constitute obstruction of justice. Late-night comedy shows had material for weeks. But beyond the media circus, the real damage was to Trump's second-term agenda. Patel was supposed to be the FBI director who would go after Trump's enemies, investigate the investigators, and reshape the Bureau into what Trump called an instrument of justice. His spectacular collapse meant Trump would have to find another nominee, someone who could survive the scrutiny that Democrats would now apply with microscopic intensity. Behind the scenes, the Justice Department was already moving. The emails Blumenthal revealed were just the beginning. Federal prosecutors immediately opened an investigation into whether Patel violated obstruction of justice statutes, conspiracy laws, or the Hatch Act prohibition on using government positions for political activity. By evening, CNN reported that the FBI had served preservation notices on Patel, Maxwell's attorney, and Roger Stone, demanding all communications be saved. Senator Blumenthal gave a press conference on the Capitol steps, surrounded by Democratic colleagues basking in their victory. "Today we saw what happens when you demand transparency in government," he said. "One email, obtained through legitimate FOIA processes, exposed a web of potentially criminal activity. This is why sunshine is the best disinfectant." But Blumenthal's triumph wasn't just about stopping Patel. It sent a message to every other Trump nominee waiting for confirmation hearings. "We're going to dig deeper, request more documents, and if you've got skeletons in your closet, we're going to find them." The Democratic resistance had found a blueprint for using FOIA requests as a confirmation weapon. Republicans scrambled to contain the damage. Senate Majority Leader John Thune held his own press conference, carefully distancing himself from Patel without directly criticizing Trump. "The Senate's advice and consent role is sacred," Thune said. "When concerns arise about a nominee's fitness, we must take them seriously, regardless of party." Translation: "We're not going to political suicide defending someone who's this toxic." By the next morning, the Washington Post published an explosive investigative piece. Their reporters had obtained additional emails through their own FOIA requests, filed months earlier. These new emails showed that Patel's communication with Maxwell's attorney wasn't a one-time occurrence. There were multiple meetings, multiple email chains, and most damning of all, references to the big guy who needed to be kept informed. While Patel never explicitly identified who the big guy was, the timing of the emails during Trump's final months in office made the implication clear. The New York Times followed with their own bombshell, testimony from FBI agents who'd been working the Epstein network investigations. These agents, speaking anonymously, described unusual obstacles that emerged in their cases during late 2023. Witnesses suddenly became uncooperative. Evidence requests were delayed. And in at least 2 cases, potential defendants seemed to know about sealed investigative activities before they should have. One agent told the Times, "Someone with access to information was tipping people off. We just couldn't prove who." Now, with Patel's emails public, investigators had their answer. The FBI reopened internal reviews of those cases, looking specifically at whether Patel had access to information he shouldn't have had and whether he shared that information with attorneys for people under investigation. For Ghislaine Maxwell herself, still serving her 20-year sentence, the revelations were a double-edged sword. Her attorney immediately filed a motion for a new trial, arguing that if government officials were coordinating with her legal team, it might constitute prosecutorial misconduct. Legal experts doubted this would succeed, but it gave Maxwell's team a new angle for appeals. Roger Stone, the other figure named in Patel's emails, went on a media blitz claiming he'd done nothing wrong. "I'm a political consultant," Stone told Tucker Carlson. "People email me about political matters all the time. I don't control what some Defense Department staffer writes to me." But Stone's credibility was already shot from his previous conviction, pardon, and constant involvement in Trump controversies. His denials only kept the story alive longer. 3 days after the hearing, Trump announced a new FBI director nominee, Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General. Bondi had her own Trump loyalty credentials, but without Patel's paper trail of potentially criminal communications. The message was clear. Trump wanted someone who would be loyal but wasn't so reckless that Democrats could destroy them in 71 seconds. For Kash Patel himself, the aftermath was personally devastating. He'd gone from rising star to toxic brand overnight. Book deals evaporated. Speaking engagements were canceled. The conservative think tank that employed him put him on leave pending resolution of legal matters. His social media accounts went dark after a final post claiming he was the victim of a deep state hit job. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact was on how confirmation hearings would be conducted going forward. Blumenthal's use of last-minute FOIA documents became the new template. Democratic senators on other committees immediately filed hundreds of new FOIA requests targeting Trump nominees. They requested emails, calendars, phone logs, travel records, anything that might reveal compromising information. Republicans complained this was unfair, that nominees deserved time to prepare for questions. But Democrats countered that if nominees were living ethical lives, they had nothing to fear from transparency. The battle lines were drawn for every future confirmation fight of Trump's second term. Legal experts debated what would happen to Patel. Some thought the Justice Department would bring charges, pointing to clear evidence of potential obstruction. Others argued that proving criminal intent would be difficult, that Patel could claim he was just doing his job, however poorly. A former U.S. attorney told Politico, "The emails are damning, but convictions require proof beyond a reasonable doubt." Patel's lawyers will argue there's a reasonable explanation for everything. What was certain was that Patel's dream of leading the FBI was dead. The man who'd wanted to investigate his enemies would now spend years being investigated himself. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. And for Trump, the lesson was clear. Loyalty matters, but competence matters more. Patel's recklessness, putting criminal coordination in writing, using government email, copying Roger Stone, had handed Democrats a perfect weapon. Future nominees would need to be smarter, more careful, better at covering their tracks. Or, as one Trump advisor put it to Axios, Kash forgot the first rule: If you're going to play dirty, don't email about it. The story of how 71 seconds and one email destroyed a nomination would be taught in political science classes for years. It was a masterclass in opposition research, in the power of FOIA requests, in the dangers of hubris, and in the reality that in Washington, nothing stays secret forever. As Senator Blumenthal said in his closing statement that day, his voice carrying across the silent hearing room, Mr. Patel came here thinking he'd charm this committee, that his loyalty to Trump was a shield against accountability. Instead, he learned what every American should know. In a democracy, no one is above the law. Not even the president's chosen FBI director. The hearing room had erupted in applause from the Democratic side. Republicans sat silent, knowing they'd just witnessed the end of a nomination and possibly the beginning of a criminal investigation that would dominate headlines for months to come. If you found this story as explosive as the hearing itself, smash that subscribe button now. Drop a like and share this with anyone who needs to understand how power and accountability collide in Washington. Comment below with your thoughts. Did Blumenthal ambush Patel unfairly, or did Patel destroy himself with his own emails? We're bringing you more breaking political drama, more stories of DC power plays, and more investigations into the people trying to run your government. Don't miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll expose who else in Trump's circle might be hiding explosive emails.